There is a moment that catches many people completely off guard. It doesn't happen during the breakup. It doesn't happen when the last message is sent, or when the door closes behind them. It happens much later, in the silence they once believed would protect them. Most people think avoidants simply stop caring when they walk away. They assume an avoidant leaves, forgets, and never looks back. But psychology paints a far more complicated picture. Emotional distance and emotional absence are not the same thing. A person can appear completely detached, while still carrying emotions they have never truly faced. In many cases, avoidants do not process heartbreak when everyone expects them to. They postpone it. They bury it beneath work, routines, distractions, or the comforting belief that leaving solved everything. Then, sometimes months or even years later, the emotional walls they built begin to crack. The memories they avoided become impossible to ignore. The person they convinced themselves they could replace suddenly becomes unforgettable, and one painful realization starts echoing louder than every excuse they once believed. They didn't just end a relationship, they broke the heart of someone who genuinely loved them. That realization can become one of the most emotionally overwhelming experiences an avoidant ever faces. It challenges the story they told themselves, shakes the defenses they depended on, and forces them to confront emotions they spent years trying to outrun. Yet this hidden psychological process is rarely discussed because it happens quietly, far away from the public eye. In this video, you'll discover why avoidants often feel the true impact of a breakup much later than other people, what actually happens inside their mind after they leave, why emotional suppression is often mistaken for emotional strength, and what finally pushes them toward their breaking point. You'll also learn why guilt and regret are not the same emotion, why certain unexpected triggers can reopen feelings they thought were gone forever, and why this delayed realization can become one of the most difficult emotional battles they ever experience. Most importantly, you'll understand why this process isn't simply about getting someone back. It's about uncovering the hidden psychology behind emotional avoidance, and seeing why some people don't recognize the damage they've caused until the person they hurt has already healed and moved on. The final part of this video reveals the psychological shift that changes everything, and it's a truth that many people never see coming. Stay with us until the end because every stage builds on the one before it, and missing even one piece can completely change how you understand avoidant attachment. Welcome to the channel, where we explore the hidden psychology behind relationships, emotional intelligence, and human behavior. If you're ready to discover what most people never learn about the avoidant mind, subscribe now and join us as we uncover the deeper truths that shape the way people love, leave, and sometimes realize everything far too late. When an avoidant decides to leave a relationship, the first emotion they often experience is not heartbreak, it is relief. That surprises many people because it seems to prove they never cared. But psychology suggests a different explanation. For someone with strong avoidant patterns, closeness can activate deep feelings of pressure, responsibility, and emotional vulnerability. The relationship itself may have brought love, comfort, and genuine connection, but it also awakened fears they never fully understood. As those fears grew stronger, their mind began searching for one solution above everything else: distance. The moment they create that distance, their nervous system often reacts as if a threat has disappeared. Their body feels lighter, their thoughts become quieter. They finally believe they can breathe again. This feeling is real, but it is also temporary. It is not proof that love disappeared overnight. It is often proof that their emotional defense system has taken control. Instead of processing painful emotions, the mind pushes them into the background. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional deactivation. Rather than facing sadness, guilt, grief, or fear, the brain lowers awareness of those feelings so the person can continue functioning without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. It is not a conscious decision in most cases. Many avoidants truly believe they are thinking clearly. They convince themselves the relationship simply was not right, that leaving was the logical choice, or that both people will be happier apart. These explanations help reduce emotional discomfort because accepting the full weight of hurting someone who genuinely loved them would be much harder. Their mind protects them by creating a story that feels emotionally safer. Freedom begins to feel more valuable than intimacy because freedom seems predictable, while closeness feels uncertain. They tell themselves they finally have space to focus on work, personal goals, hobbies, or their own life. Friends may even notice they seem happier or more relaxed during the first weeks after the breakup. They smile more, they appear calm, they seem completely certain about their decision. But what people see on the outside does not always match what is happening underneath. Deep emotions rarely disappear simply because someone walks away. They are often postponed. The nervous system can suppress emotional pain, but it cannot erase it. Like water held behind a dam, those feelings continue building pressure, even when everything looks peaceful from the surface. At first, distractions make this emotional distance seem permanent. Work becomes busier, new routines fill the day. Exercise, travel, entertainment, or meeting new people creates enough stimulation to keep difficult thoughts away. Some avoidants begin dating again very quickly, not necessarily because they have healed, but because new experiences temporarily silence uncomfortable emotions. Novelty gives the brain something fresh to focus on. It creates excitement that feels like moving forward. Independence also becomes part of the emotional shield. Living without constant emotional demands reinforces the belief that leaving solved the problem. Every peaceful day strengthens the story they tell themselves. Yet there is an important difference between emotional numbness and emotional healing. Healing requires facing emotions, understanding them, and allowing them to move through you. Numbness simply delays that process. Someone who is emotionally numb may look completely fine while carrying unresolved grief beneath the surface. Because avoidants often learned early in life to disconnect from painful emotions instead of expressing them, this pattern can continue for years without being questioned. The danger is that unresolved emotions do not disappear just because they are ignored. The human brain keeps unfinished emotional experiences active in subtle ways. Memories connected to deep relationships are stored differently than ordinary daily events. When a relationship involved genuine love, trust, vulnerability, or emotional safety, those experiences become deeply connected to identity. Walking away from the relationship does not automatically disconnect those emotional pathways. Instead, they remain quietly active, waiting for reminders that bring them back into awareness. At first, those reminders seem harmless. A familiar song plays unexpectedly while driving home. A favorite restaurant appears while passing through town. A movie reminds them of a shared conversation. A certain season returns with its familiar smells and weather. They scroll through old photos without intending to. They remember a joke only the two of you understood. None of these moments seem significant by themselves, but together they slowly weaken the emotional walls that once felt impossible to break. Each reminder asks the brain a silent question it has been avoiding. What if leaving did not solve everything? What if the person who loved you wasn't actually the problem? These thoughts appear briefly before being pushed away again, but each time they return they stay a little longer. Gradually the distractions lose some of their power. Work ends for the day. Friends go home. The phone becomes quiet. Weekends become longer, nights become more silent. The independence that once felt exciting starts feeling ordinary. The freedom they fought so hard to protect no longer creates the same emotional relief. Instead, empty spaces begin filling with memories. The mind naturally returns to unfinished emotional experiences because it seeks resolution. It wants to understand what happened. It wants answers. This process often unfolds so slowly that the avoidant barely notices it. They still believe they have moved on. They still repeat the same reasons for leaving. But underneath those thoughts, another emotional process has quietly begun. Then something unexpected starts happening. Life begins showing them evidence that the person they left behind did not remain frozen in time. They hear from mutual friends that you seem happier. Someone casually mentions a new achievement in your life. They notice changes through social media or unexpected encounters. Instead of finding someone still waiting, they begin seeing someone growing without them. That realization can create emotions they never anticipated. The emotional support they once took for granted is suddenly gone. The comforting messages, the understanding during stressful days, the person who celebrated their victories and listened during their failures is no longer part of everyday life. At first they believed they wanted space, but now that space feels unusually quiet. Familiar places become emotionally different because your presence no longer exists there. Walking into a cafe where you once spent hours together no longer feels comforting. It feels empty. Birthdays arrive without your message. Holidays pass without shared traditions. Anniversaries that once meant nothing after the breakup suddenly become impossible to ignore. Quiet evenings become the most difficult because there are no distractions left to compete with memory. During these moments, the brain often remembers the relationship differently than it did immediately after the breakup. Earlier, it focused on conflict, pressure, and reasons to leave. Now it begins recovering moments of laughter, kindness, emotional safety, and genuine connection. Memory becomes stronger than reality because the emotional defenses protecting them are slowly losing their strength. They begin asking themselves questions they avoided for months. Was that person really asking for too much, or was I afraid of giving more? Did I leave because I stopped loving them, or because loving someone that deeply terrified me? Did I mistake emotional safety for emotional pressure? These questions create discomfort because they challenge the identity they built after leaving. Many avoidants prefer seeing themselves as logical, independent, and emotionally controlled. Admitting they deeply hurt someone who truly loved them forces them to reconsider that image. Then comes one of the hardest realizations of all. They begin understanding not only what they lost, but what they caused. They replay conversations they once dismissed. They remember moments when you reached out while they pulled away. They recognize expressions of love they once overlooked. Small acts of patience suddenly carry new meaning. Sacrifices they barely noticed now appear impossible to ignore. This is often the first time empathy fully reaches the emotional center they had protected for so long. Regret begins to appear, but guilt feels even heavier. Regret focuses on wishing things had turned out differently. Guilt focuses on recognizing personal responsibility for another person's pain. That distinction matters because guilt forces deeper self-reflection. It asks difficult questions about character, choices, and emotional maturity. They may realize your love was genuine all along, while their fear convinced them it was something to escape. That realization creates an intense conflict between shame and longing. Part of them wants to reconnect, apologize, or repair the damage. Another part fears they no longer deserve forgiveness. They wonder whether reaching out would heal anything, or simply reopen old wounds. For perhaps the first time since leaving, they stop asking whether the breakup was necessary, and start asking whether they destroyed something they may never find again. The moment an avoidant reaches their emotional breaking point rarely looks dramatic from the outside. There may be no public confession, no emotional collapse that everyone can see, and no sudden display of tears. Instead, the real battle begins quietly inside their own mind. The emotional walls that protected them for so long begin losing their strength all at once. Feelings they successfully ignored for weeks, months, or even years suddenly demand attention at the same time. Memories return with unusual clarity. Conversations they once dismissed replay over and over. Small moments of kindness that seemed ordinary now carry enormous emotional weight. This experience is often described as emotional flooding because the mind is no longer able to control the feelings it worked so hard to suppress. Sadness, guilt, longing, confusion, and fear all arrive together. For someone who has spent much of life avoiding emotional vulnerability, this can feel overwhelming. They may struggle to sleep because their thoughts refuse to slow down. They may lose focus at work because memories constantly interrupt their attention. Activities that once distracted them no longer provide relief. The emotions they delayed are finally demanding to be felt. Along with this emotional flooding comes delayed grief. Most people expect grief to happen immediately after a breakup, but avoidants often experience it much later. While others may have cried, reflected, and slowly healed, the avoidant may have postponed the grieving process entirely. Now they are experiencing emotions that should have unfolded gradually, but instead arrive all at once. This delayed grief can feel confusing because life may appear stable on the surface while everything inside feels unsettled. They begin mourning not only the relationship, but also the future they quietly imagined without fully admitting it to themselves. They remember plans that never happened, conversations they never finished, apologies they never gave, and moments they wish they had handled differently. The hardest part is realizing that time has continued moving forward whether they were emotionally ready or not. Shame often follows close behind. Unlike guilt, which focuses on specific actions, shame begins attacking identity. Instead of thinking, "I made a mistake," they begin thinking, "Maybe I am the problem." That shift is painful because it threatens the image they have built of themselves. Many avoidants see themselves as independent, logical, and emotionally controlled. Accepting that fear guided many of their choices instead of wisdom can be deeply uncomfortable. They begin questioning decisions they once defended with complete confidence. Self-blame grows stronger as forgotten memories return. They remember the messages they ignored, the affection they pulled away from, the patience they received but failed to appreciate, and the moments someone offered understanding while they responded with distance. Suddenly those moments look completely different. What once felt like protecting themselves now feels like pushing away someone who truly cared. They may wonder how many chances they were given before the relationship finally ended. They ask themselves whether they confused love with pressure or vulnerability with weakness. These questions often have no easy answers, making the emotional burden even heavier. As the desire to reconnect begins growing, another powerful fear appears, the fear of rejection. Ironically, the person who once created distance now becomes afraid of experiencing the very rejection they unknowingly caused. They imagine sending a message that never receives a reply. They picture hearing that you have moved on with someone else. They fear discovering that the place they once occupied in your life no longer exists. This fear becomes even stronger when they realize how much time has passed. Every week of silence feels like another door quietly closing. They begin asking themselves whether they waited too long. They wonder if their realization came after your healing had already begun. The possibility that they missed their chance can become emotionally devastating because it forces them to face consequences they never expected. Reaching out suddenly feels far more difficult than walking away ever did. During the breakup, emotional defenses gave them confidence. Now those defenses are gone, leaving only vulnerability. Sending one simple message suddenly carries enormous emotional risk. What if you ignore them? What if you respond politely but without emotion? What if your kindness makes them realize how much they truly lost? These possibilities create an intense internal conflict. One part of them wants honesty. Another part desperately wants self-protection. They may write messages and delete them before sending. They may open your profile countless times without contacting you. They rehearse conversations in their mind, but never speak the words aloud. The battle between vulnerability and self-protection becomes exhausting because both sides seem equally frightening. Remaining silent protects them from rejection, but guarantees continued regret. Speaking honestly risks emotional pain, but also offers the possibility of closure or reconciliation. Every avoidant handles this conflict differently, which is why their behavior often seems confusing from the outside. Not every avoidant responds to this emotional breaking point in the same way. Some suddenly become unusually communicative after months of silence. A simple message asking how you are can represent weeks of internal struggle. Others begin checking your social media regularly, not because they enjoy watching from a distance, but because it feels safer than direct contact. They look for signs that reveal whether you seem happy, whether you have entered a new relationship, or whether there might still be room for them in your life. Some ask mutual friends casual questions that appear harmless but are actually attempts to understand where they stand. They may pretend curiosity while secretly searching for hope. Others create small opportunities for accidental conversations, reacting to old posts, sending a birthday greeting, or mentioning something that reminds them of you. These actions are often careful tests rather than confident attempts to rebuild the relationship. They are quietly asking a question without saying it directly. Is the door completely closed, or is there still a chance? Yet many avoidants never reach out at all. Fear keeps them frozen. They convince themselves you are better without them. They assume you would reject them anyway. Sometimes shame becomes so overwhelming that remaining silent feels easier than risking confirmation that they caused irreversible damage. This explains why mixed signals are so common. One day they seem interested, the next day they disappear again. They may move closer emotionally before pulling away once more. These patterns are not always games or manipulation. Often they reflect an unresolved conflict between wanting connection and fearing the vulnerability required to create it. While all of this may be happening inside the avoidant, something equally important has been happening inside the person they left behind. Healing changes the entire emotional landscape. The version of you they remember is no longer the version standing before them. Emotional independence quietly reshapes relationship dynamics in ways many avoidants never expect. During the relationship, they may have assumed your love would always be available. After enough healing, that assumption no longer matches reality. People who genuinely heal stop chasing answers that another person refuses to provide. They stop measuring their worth through someone else's attention. Instead of waiting for explanations, they begin creating peace within themselves. That shift changes everything. Confidence replaces constant anxiety. Boundaries replace endless second chances. Emotional stability replaces emotional dependence. Ironically, these changes often make the healed person appear more attractive than ever before. Not because they are trying harder, but because they are no longer trying to convince anyone to stay. Peace has a quiet strength that pursuit never achieves. Healthy boundaries communicate self-respect without needing endless words. The avoidant may finally recognize qualities they overlooked when those qualities are no longer freely available. But healing also teaches another important lesson. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. A person can genuinely forgive without reopening the relationship. They can release anger while still protecting their future. Some emotional wounds create wisdom that permanently changes relationship standards. Love may still exist, but trust must be rebuilt through consistent action, not emotional promises. Some relationships simply cannot return to what they once were because both people have changed through the experience. The avoidance realization does not automatically repair the damage created by months or years of emotional absence. Real change requires much more than regret. It begins with accountability. That means accepting responsibility without blaming circumstances, childhood experiences, stress, or the other person's reactions. Emotional self-awareness becomes essential because lasting transformation depends on recognizing old patterns before repeating them. Many people benefit from therapy or intentional personal growth because understanding attachment patterns intellectually is very different from changing them emotionally. Learning emotional regulation allows difficult feelings to be experienced without immediately escaping through distance or withdrawal. Perhaps most importantly, genuine transformation is measured through consistent behavior, not sincere words. Promises made during emotional pain are easy. Living differently after the emotions settle is much harder. Insight alone is never enough because awareness without action eventually becomes another form of avoidance. Temporary regret fades as life becomes comfortable again. Lasting transformation continues making different choices long after the emotional crisis has passed. Sometimes the greatest emotional consequences are not immediate. They arrive quietly, long after the arguments have ended, the messages have stopped, and life appears to have moved on. As we've explored today, avoidants often experience loss much later because emotional suppression can delay feelings, but it cannot erase them. The emotions they avoid have a way of returning when the mind is finally ready to face them. That is why their breaking point often comes unexpectedly, triggered by memories, quiet moments, or the realization that someone who once loved them has truly moved forward. We also learned that guilt and regret are not the same. Regret wishes things had been different. Guilt accepts responsibility for the pain that was caused. That difference is what makes an avoidance breaking point so emotionally powerful. It is not simply about missing a relationship. It is about recognizing the value of a person they may not have fully appreciated until they were gone. At the same time, your healing changes everything. When you stop chasing answers, stop begging to be understood, and begin choosing your own peace, the entire balance of the relationship shifts. You become stronger, calmer, and more emotionally independent. Whether the avoidant comes back or not no longer defines your future because your happiness is no longer tied to their decision. Perhaps the most important lesson is this. Real change is never measured by tears, apologies, or emotional words spoken in a moment of pain. Genuine transformation requires accountability. It requires emotional self-awareness, consistent actions, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths instead of running from them. Without that, even the deepest regret can fade back into old patterns. Sometimes the deepest heartbreak is not losing someone. It is realizing too late that they gave you the kind of love you may never find again. By then, the person you left behind may have rebuilt their life, discovered their worth, and found a peace that no longer depends on your return. That is why healing is so powerful. It doesn't rewrite the past, but it completely transforms the future. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this video gave you a new perspective on avoidant attachment and the hidden psychology behind delayed regret, don't let this be the end of the conversation. Subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into relationships, emotional intelligence, attachment styles, and human behavior. Give this video a like if you found it valuable, and share it with someone who may be searching for answers about a relationship they still don't fully understand. And before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe people truly change after they realize the pain they've caused, or do some realizations simply come too late? Your story might help someone else who is watching this today. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember this. The strongest person is not always the one who never gets hurt. The strongest person is the one who heals, protects their peace, and never loses themselves while waiting for someone else to change.